Carrie Underwood, State House District 3, Northwest Corner.
Parker Moore, House District 4, Decatur, Madison, Huntsville area, Morgan, Limestone, Madison counties.
Ben Robbins, District 33, Talladega and Coosa counties.
John Wright, District 52, Birmingham, Alabama, Mississippi State.
Kelvin Lawrence, House District 69, Lowndes, Wilcox, Ottawa, and Montgomery counties.
Bill Lamb, House District 62, Tuscaloosa.
And good morning, I'm Margie Wilcox. It's my pleasure to be the chair of the board's agency and commissions. I'd like to remind everybody to please turn off their cell phones at this time. All right, Representative Lamb, will you please offer our opening prayer?
Let us pray. Father God, it's with grateful hearts that we come before you this morning. First and foremost, praising your holy name. Thank you for your provision, your mercy that we use every morning. Now we ask that you give us wisdom, not only wisdom, but understanding and discernment as we conduct the state's business. And I pray this all in the strong name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you. Amaya, would you approach the podium and give your report from the Secretary of State's report that we received? Again, this is Amaya A.G. She is our intern this year, and she's done some very important work on our behalf.
Good morning, committee and chairwoman. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, guys. We received a file from the Secretary of State containing all boards and commissions' most recent update. Based on the list that was received, there were approximately 376 boards and agencies listed on the document. About 318 out of the 376 had recently updated their information with the Secretary of State between March the 1st, 2022 and December 13th, 2023. From the remaining agencies, approximately 58 boards and commissions were contacted, and only 2 were no longer active commissions. 33 agencies have not responded to any phone calls, but 23 of the 58 have updated their profiles with the Secretary of State. In addition, 7 additional agencies that were not called decided to also update their profiles with the Secretary of State.
Good job. This helps when the boards, agency, and commissions are audited by the Sunset Committee. What we found this past year, there's a finding that they didn't update their information. So when we received this, we were trying to be proactive and contact them and let them know before they're audited that they needed to do this. It was calling a lot of people. She's still working on it every day that she's here. So y'all give her a round of applause. She did some good work. Thank you, Maya. All right. Yes, sir. You're recognized.
Just out of curiosity, what were the 2 that were no longer in existence that were found?
It was the Alabama Historical Commission for Maritime Advisory Council and the Cahaba Space Commission.
Thank you.
Certainly. Any other questions of Amaya? Yes, sir.
I just want to be marked present. I think we started a few minutes before 10:30. I just want to be present.
Okay, would you like to introduce yourself to the crowd?
No, ma'am, I just want to be on the roll. Well, hey, everybody. My name is Napoleon Bracey. Glad to be here today. Just want to be marked present today.
Would you please let everybody know where you're from, sir?
Okay, I live in Mobile County. I represent Alabama House District 98.
Thank you. Do we have any other members that have arrived after we did the introductions?
Yeah, I introduced myself.
Okay, now clerk, will you call the roll?
Ms. Wilcox.
Here.
Mr. Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Rogers.
Present.
Mr. Hurst. Mr. Bracey.
Here.
Mr. Butler. Mr. Lawrence.
Here.
Mr. Moore.
Here.
Miss Gibbons. Mr. Lamb.
Here.
Mr. Underwood.
I'm here.
Have a quorum.
Thank you, Mary Ruth. We appreciate your service. Senator Elliott, we have on the agenda today your bill. Would you please get up and present SB 77? We're not going to vote on this today. We're going to have a public hearing. So introduce the bill and let us all know what it's about.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present this legislation. And as you mentioned, I understand you are going to have a public hearing and not vote on the bill today, which is perfectly fine with me. Just so the committee knows, and I want to apologize ahead of time, and not being disrespectful, but I'm going to have to leave shortly after I speak with y'all because I have a committee meeting upstairs that I have to preside over. So happy to take a few questions that I'm going to have to jet, but forgive me in advance. Representative Rogers, it's good to see you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, Senate Bill 77 deals with the Archives and History Board. Last summer, a number of colleagues and I, both in the House and Senate, became aware of the fact that the Archives and History Board is self-perpetuating. That means it essentially appoints itself and recommends itself for appointment or reappointment. Those appointees are then confirmed by the Senate. But that does not follow the usual path that we have in the state of Alabama, where appointments are done by elected officials, whether that's the lieutenant governor, the speaker, the pro tem, or the governor. What Senate Bill 77 does is move those appointments and the appointing authority from the board itself to appoint and reappoint itself to elected officials. And that is spread across the pro tem of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Governor in the bill that passed out of the Senate. There were a number of amendments that were made to the bill in the Senate that kept the board as it currently exists, and then as those terms expire, the new appointments will take place. So it leaves the current board as it is, and then as those terms expire, the new appointing authorities will make their appointments. It adds a significant amount of diversity language in the piece in the legislation that was important to my colleagues, Senator Smitherman in particular. And it added members to the board so that the minority leader in both the House and the Senate had appointments to the board as well. And so that is the bill in a nutshell. It ensures, again, that there is some path of accountability back to the people of the state of Alabama, rather than a self-appointing board, a board that is appointed by elected officials who are then accountable to the people of the state at polls. And that's the bill.
Do any of the members have questions? Representative Rogers first, then Representative Moore.
Why is this bill necessary? Is the board broken already? Is it broken? I mean, are they not forming to do this? Why is this bill necessary? Is it a broken board? Is they not performing their functions? Or somebody doing something right or what?
That's a great question, Representative, and one that we should always ask about any piece of legislation, right? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? And again, as I mentioned back this summer, there was some conversation about a particular program at the Alabama Department of Archives and History. And while that conversation took place, regardless of the nature of the conversation, the subject conversation, it became apparent to a number of members of both the House and Senate that this board essentially isn't answerable to anyone, right? They simply appoint and reappoint themselves, or buddies, or whatever else. They don't seek.
I'm going to ask that everybody keeps their comments and sounds to themselves while he's presenting. Thank you.
They are essentially self-appointing. They're not responsible to any other elected official. And that was seen as a problem, and hence the nature of the bill.
Representative Moore, you were next.
I found what I was looking for.
Representative Bracy.
Yes, ma'am. I wasn't privileged to the conversation, so can we understand more about what happened, what brought this on to want to change? I know you said something happened last summer that brought attention to the matter.
Well, I don't know that it's particularly relevant to the conversation.
I guess it's relevant to me being able to make a decision on it. So I'm just wondering what happened.
Yeah, the issue,
because a lot of times things happen that make us go forward to push for legislation, and I'm just wondering what happened.
So the issue that brought this matter to the attention of a number of, again, House and Senate members was a program that was hosted at the Alabama Department of Archives and History, the nature and content of that program. And again, the questioning of that, as we as legislators should do as representatives of our constituents, led to the realization that there was really no accountability, and that there's no path back to other elected officials and the people. And so regardless of the conversation or the questioning or the subject matter there was this, hold on, this moment, right? This aha moment, hold on just a second. There's no accountability here. These folks aren't appointed by anybody that we work with that are elected, that are accountable back to the people. And so we wanted to make sure that we changed that.
So was it a history program? I mean, is it a reason we don't want to discuss what the program was? Was it
No, I
history?
mean, we can spend all day talking about the program. My point is, Representative, that the fact is that the issue is about the self-perpetuating board.
Okay, but I guess I'm wondering, was it a history program? I don't know.
I don't think it was a history program, no.
So it had nothing to do with history?
I'm just telling you, I don't think, but that's, again, that's my point, is I'm not sure that's germane. The point is that this is a self-perpetuating board, and the Senate, in its passage of this bill, has indicated it'd like to move away from a self-perpetuating board and move to one that is more accountable to the people of the state of Alabama.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
sure, maybe at some point somebody can tell me what happened.
Yeah.
Because it apparently, we don't want to talk about what happened. And I think at some point, we need to know what happened that sparked this on. Was it history? Was it not history? Or was it history that people don't like? I don't know, but at some point, I think we need to have that conversation if we're gonna vote on this. And we can have it here, or we can have it on the floor, but we're gonna have it.
There's gonna be a public hearing where you'll get to hear everything I think that you wanna hear.
All right, thank you.
Representative Robbins, you're recognized.
I know you're in a hurry, so I won't take much of your time, but are you aware of any other boards that are any other boards, agencies, or commissions that are self-perpetuating?
That's a good question, Representative, and that came up on the floor in the Senate. Senator Figures brought that up, and to some extent, our constitutionally chartered institutions of higher education, think Auburn and Alabama, have boards that operate similarly, but not exactly, and there are some exceptions. And in the Senate, particularly in the confirmations processes, there are differences in how this board functions from some of our higher ed folks who are, again, constitutionally chartered. And if you don't believe that, go ask them, because they'll tell you real quick. But that's the only approximation that I found. I'm not saying that is the only, but that's the only approximation. It's just different. It's important to note that it's close, but it's different.
Right, so what you're saying is you know of no other board or agency that is not a constitutionally chartered board or agency that is fully self-perpetuating.
That's correct, and hence the bill.
Any other questions of the members before we start the hearing? Representative Rogers?
If you, well, through the bill, if you get rid of everybody all at one time, you're going to wipe it clean, right? They'll start over fresh with a whole new batch of folk.
So, Representative Rogers, I hear you, and that is exactly why we made the changes and amendments in the Senate on the floor. That is expressly not what is happening under the engrossed version of the bill. So, just to be clear, the members will complete their term that they are currently serving, and then as those terms expire, the new appointing authorities in the legislation will backfill those folks. So that could, in many instances, take up to 6 years. So your concern is well-founded, so much so that we already fixed it.
You know, I'm like, I don't know what happened, because like somebody got their axe blowed and got mad or something, and they reacted to this, just do away with it, and just get it started from scratch. So I want to know the background of what happened for this. When this comes, it always comes when somebody get mad at somebody, and say, I just get you back. And I want to make sure this is not occurring in this situation.
I'd like to interject that he's here talking about the bill, and it's our duty as the committee to listen to the public hearing and the people that we have. I don't want to belabor that. I want to give everybody the opportunity to talk. We do have meetings after this. But our main function at this committee is to look at the body of this bill, make recommended changes to what we think positive changes would be made. But trying to describe what is his motivation, I'm not interested in doing that today. I want to get to the business of this committee. Does anybody have any other questions about this bill? Representative Moore.
Yes, Madam Chair. I was looking, and I might have oversight here, but it doesn't say that they shall not be reappointed, right? And there is no term limit on, that they can continue to be reappointed every 6 years.
Representative Moore, you are absolutely correct, and that's a very good point to make, and I appreciate you bringing that up because I failed to, and that is that there are endless opportunities for the current members that are serving on this board to be reappointed. As a matter of fact, I've already heard from some of the appointing authorities that are mentioned in this legislation that they would reappoint a number of members that were on the board, and that's fine with me, and that's exactly the what I'm trying to empower them to do. So good point, and you are exactly correct. Many of the members of this board, I think, stand to be reappointed as their term expires, just like they would be anyway. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have one last thing.
You're recognized.
Before we start the public hearing, I understand where you're coming from about the legislation, but I just want to also make sure that we go on record and make note that when legislation passed, when we go to court, people want to know what was the intent of the legislation. What was the legislative intent? What did the sponsor of the bill intend on doing with the legislation? And I think that's why the questioning is coming forward with the sponsor of the bill to understand what's the intent, what's behind it, because we all know that when we have to go to court for these issues and go on record, that's where it goes to what was the legislative intent. And I think that's why the questioning was want to have clarity, at least on my part, want to have clarity about it. So thank you. And thank you, Senator.
Senator, would you be willing to meet with some of the members in person?
Absolutely.
And then under oath, he can describe, if he gets to a court case, he can describe what his motivations are.
Under oath is fine by me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, thank you again for your attention to this matter. And I apologize for having to run off on you, but it's busy up there. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to call the speakers out of order. Mr. Murray, I'd like to call you first. And I'd like to remind everybody that I know you want to be heard and we want to hear you. But if the person before you got up and said everything that you were going to say, I don't mind, and I'm sure the other committees don't mind, and say, please refer to the speaker named so-and-so. I believe everything that she said. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Everybody else, because of the time constraints of the meetings, I'm going to restrict you to 2 minutes. So I'd like for you to lead off, and hopefully you can give a lot of the points that you would like made today. Mary Ruth is going to give the yellow sign when you're halfway through your presentation.
15 seconds left.
When you got 15 seconds left, and she's going to flash you the red card when you're done.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. The Department of Archives and History has been in existence since 1901. It was actually the first state-funded archival and historical agency in the nation. And in 1901, the legislature created a board of trustees that did have responsibility for filling vacancies on the board as they're created, but then to send those names to the Senate for confirmation, and it's worked that way for 123 years. And we think that it's worked quite well during that time. However, we certainly recognize the legislature's intent and desire to see changes in, for purposes of accountability in the governance of the agency. And if it's the committee's desire to move forward with that, we've brought a recommendation that we think is quite reasonable. Rather than placing the Board of Trustees under 5 or 6 appointing authorities that would be charged with trying to coordinate all of those appointments to match the geographic, racial, gender, diversity of the state as the legislature intends, treat the agency more like the other historical and cultural agencies in the executive branch of the government, where the governor makes those appointments. We're recommending that the governor continue to submit those names to the Senate for confirmation. We're also recommending that the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem be given seats on the board, as the governor already has as a voting member of the Board of Trustees. We think all those provisions add the accountability that we hear the legislature saying that you're looking for. There's another very important component of this language that we would like to see changed. The current version of SB 77 says that board members serve at the pleasure of they're appointing authorities. And I can't find another agency in the executive branch that has a mission anywhere similar to the Department of Archives and History that has that kind of ability of appointing authorities to pull board members off of a governing board at any time, for any reason or no reason. So we are recommending instead that with the governor making the appointments, that the governor have the ability to remove a board member for just cause. That standard applies throughout the code, applying to lots of agencies. It's a reasonable standard. It's a higher threshold than someone just serving at the pleasure of an appointing authority. And all of those details are spelled out in the chart that we've been circulating to you. This places us in the context of similar agencies like the USS Alabama Board, the Space and Rocket Center Board, the Motorsports Hall of Fame Board. I think if you take a look at our presentation, you'll see that we have recommended a path that puts us right in the mainstream of executive branch agencies that have responsibility for the state's historical functions and cultural functions. So that's the essence of it, members. We think this is a sound, reasonable approach, and I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions at the end of the public hearing, Madam Chairwoman, or at whatever you wish.
Thank you, and I appreciate y'all's good faith efforts in coming with some compromises to make this bill a better bill. I'd like to offer it up to any of the members. If they have a question for Mr. Murray, please do so now. Seek to be recognized. Mr. Robbins, you're recognized.
Hi, Director Murray. I have a couple questions. I know this amendment hasn't been introduced, but you provided us with a handout. How currently, so with this handout, you have on the side removal, and you show how other agencies are removed. How is a trustee or a member of the Board of Trustees removed now from archives?
Currently, yes, sir. Currently, there is not a provision in the code that does that. The board does have a set of bylaws that says that board members are expected to participate as members and have regular attendance, and that if they don't do that, they would be asked to step down. And that's happened before, where a member just can't attend meetings and they'll step away from the board. So in that chart, what's new about 77 is this language at the pleasure of.
Right. And so that means the State Arts Council and the Public Library Service, neither of those, based on your handout, have anything concerning how those are removed.
I could not find anything in their sections of the code.
Okay. So what you want is to match the Space and Rockets, what you just said. You just want to match those that you have on here, but just out of curiosity, with your spreadsheet, did you find other agencies that have at the pleasure of the appointing authority or serve at the pleasure of X, and you didn't include them on here, or is this?
I did not find any boards, and keep in mind, I listed historical and cultural agencies in this document. There are, that language appears in code, but typically when you're talking about executive directors, so that executive directors serve at the pleasure of boards who appoint those people. I did not do an exhaustive search of every board in state government to see if that language exists. No, sir.
Representative Bracy, did you seek recognition for a question? Representative Underwood, you're recognized.
Mine's probably more of a question from a legal standpoint of the difference between at the pleasure of, this is probably not even for you, sir, I'm sorry. The difference between at the pleasure of and
For just cause.
For just cause. I'm not sure what the difference is between those two.
Causes, you have to show cause. Alabama is an at-will state, so you can fire someone for any, is it private employment, you could be fired for any reason. But if you add cause, then you have to terminate that individual, you have to show cause for why you did it. So that person that got terminated would have the right to argue, well, I shouldn't have been fired, and it'd be a process on, well, here's the cause and the reason for your termination. So at the pleasure of matches the at will, where at any point the appointing authority could say, for no reason whatsoever, could eliminate you from that position.
There's still some level of subjectivity, I guess, is my question. Just cause could be somewhat subjective.
I mean,
I know it's a ignorant question, I'm sorry.
I would say yes, there could be some subjectivity to it. I think, Bill might also be able to answer too, county government, that, you can't just lay someone off because you didn't like the shirt they wore.
Yeah.
Or something. You've got to say you breached your responsibility, your duty, and we're terminating you. And it'd be the same thing for the board. If you have a responsibility, you fail to uphold your responsibility, so that is the cause for terminating.
So it gives them an opportunity to rebuttal and.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, appreciate your input, Vice Chair.
In the board,
Rogers, you're recognized.
The board functions to kind of oversee the duties of the agency, right?
Yes, sir.
If the board functions now, it's nothing personal between, I'm trying to keep the person out. Is the board functioning properly now?
I believe so, extremely well. It meets quarterly and reviews the performance of the agency, reviews my performance. I report to this board. They appoint the director of the Department of Archives and History. They are public servants from throughout the state who are very dedicated to our mission as an agency.
Can I ask you another question? What's the racial makeup of the board right now?
We actually have a very representative composition that matches the demographics of the state quite well, Mr. Rogers. It is, Chairwoman has it there in front of you, or that's the actual board list.
Go ahead.
Currently, the board is 73% white, 27% African American, 47% male, and 53% female.
I did pretty good.
Especially for a board we getting rid of. Appears to be doing it.
My kudos up to you, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Righty, any other questions of the speaker? All right, thank you, and I hope you make yourself available after the meeting, should they have any questions individually.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, I'm gonna call the next speaker. I remind you that, get up and please make your comments germane to the bill or to the amendment that has been submitted. Dolores Boyd, you're being recognized. Gary Burton, you're on deck. Carrie Banks, you're in the hole.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. It's been my privilege to serve this state on the Board of Trustees for the Archives for almost 12 years now, nearing the end of my second term, and I now serve as chairwoman. Change can be as difficult to adjust to as history. And without repeating our director's statement succinctly of why we're asking you to look at the recommended changes we make in SB 77, I want to focus on the impact on two different entities by what now stands as SB 77. The trustees and donors out there who might consider giving their historic memorabilia or their money to support the mission of the archives. From the perspective of the trustees, being appointed to serve at the pleasure of appointing authorities simply means that we are chilled in how we are to go about our business of decision making. Do we look to be accountable to one person in the legislature as opposed to the legislative body? That is the change that is too radical for us to understand. We should be accountable to the body, not to one legislator or multiple legislators. From the perspective of donors, what can be more unstable, chaotic than a board that is forever changing? Look closely at what's being proposed and consider our reasonable alternatives. Thank you.
Ms. Boyd, thank you so much for your comments. Gary Burton, you're recognized. Carrie Banks, you're on deck. Mahela Hamilton, you're in the hole.
I'm going to forego my remarks and simply say that I will forego my remarks and simply say that I certainly stand with the last two speakers in their support of Steve Murray and what happens at the State Archives. It is a temple to knowledge. It's well-run, well-staffed. I'm a user, and I do research there. And it's, I'm sure there are ways they can improve. I just haven't found them yet, but I'm in search for them. I support them fully, so I'm not going to say any more than that.
We appreciate you being here, Mr. Burton. Carrie Banks, you're recognized. Ms. Hamilton, you're on deck. Evelyn Tackett, you're in the hole.
Thank you, Chairwoman Wilcox. And I thank the committee for agreeing not to take a vote today and for listening to us earnestly. My name is Carrie Banks. I reside in Montgomery, and I'm the Vice President of the Friends of the Alabama Archives, which is a membership organization comprised of people who believe in the value of the Archives mission. But for 25 years, I worked for the Alabama League of Municipalities. During my time with the League, I learned that consistency is a sound, common sense government solution, and that local governments value consistency in managing their departments and endeavors. And I think several of you here have experience at the local level. I'm asking you today to apply that same idea of consistency to the amended version that we're offering of SB 77. As Steve noted, it addresses the accountability concerns, and then it also addresses a way for the board to continue to be accountable and productive without feeling like they're being pressured because of a certain way that the board is being formed. No other executive agency and no other Alabama historical or cultural institution has a board comprised the way SB 77 is currently. It would make this board an outlier, and this board doesn't need to be an outlier. As we meet in your room today, Archives are working on a 15-year project to preserve and digitize the photographic record of Alabama's leading 20th century newspapers. Many archive initiatives take decades of diligent work to complete, decades. Inconsistency would threaten the mission of the Alabama Archives. And as the keeper of our state's foundational documents, fabric masterpieces from the G's Ben Quilters, or even handwritten lyrics by Hank Williams, consistency is a common sense approach. So on behalf of the Friends of the Archives, I respectfully ask you to keep this in mind as you deliberate today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. We appreciate you being here. Ms. Hamilton, you're recognized. Evelyn Tackett, you're on deck. Lonex, you're in the hole. Ludi Lee Lonex,
I've been called worse.
you're in the hole. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Wilcox, Vice Chair Rogers, and members of the Alabama House Committee on Boards, Agencies, and Commissions. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you today. Good morning. My name is Magdala Chu Hamilton. I speak to you in opposition to SB 77 in its current form, requesting your consideration of the critical amendments provided to you by the Archives. I live and work in Birmingham as a writer and editor and strategic planner working in historical preservation. I am the executive director of the Ballard House Project in Birmingham. It is a nonprofit entity dedicated to the preservation of African American community history. And point of personal privilege, I am the child of educators. My mother was a librarian for 25 years. I grew up in libraries, working in them. I am also a PhD candidate in history and a member of the Board of Trustees of the Department of Archives and History, representing District 6, appointed by the legislature in 2021. And I do have to say, I am not, and I was not the buddy of anyone at the time of my appointment. They only knew of my work, not of me personally. The Archives is an excellent resource of historical preservation that works to reflect and represent the rich history of citizens and communities across the state. Thousands benefit from its extensive archival collections, preservation of state and public records, storehouse of family and community histories, and its assistance to county and local governments. Tens of thousands, as you know, benefit from its curated exhibits, museums, historical events, programs of outreach for teachers and students, digital collections, which I have used in my class, and presentations. I am sharing with you because so much has been mentioned before. I am honored to serve on the Board of Trustees, highly qualified, dedicated volunteers who as a body are accountable, actively ensuring the effective and fiscally sound state, federal, and private resources that are provided. Please, please listen to us, to this community of people from across the state. This is a successful entity. It is serving the citizens of this state actively and effectively, and I ask you to allow it to continue.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate you being here. Evelyn Tackett, you're recognized. Is it Lucy Lee Lanou? All righty. You're on deck, and Tom Turley, you're in the hole. Please introduce yourself and tell us.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Evelyn Tackett. I'm a citizen of Montgomery. I'm here to tell you that I have made frequent use of the Alabama Department of Archives and History, and I truly appreciate the excellence, the professionalism. I want to say that as constituted currently, the board is confirmed by the Senate. It is recognized, the agency is recognized nationally in multiple ways. I want to say that it is well respected by state historians. I heard from 3 of them yesterday, speaking of how well this archives works. I do believe that, in my opinion, board members should not be removed at will, but should be removed for just cause. That seems like a reasonable amendment. And I appreciate your continued support for the Alabama Department of Archives and History, and urge you to structure their governance in ways that mirror other high-functioning Alabama historical and cultural agencies.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your comments, Ms. Tackett. Lucy Lee Lanou, you're up. Tom Turley, you're on deck. Wanda Battle, you're in the hole.
Let's hear you say it.
Lucy Lee Lanou, Lazarus Shoe, Ascension Parish, Louisiana, is where my husband's from, family's from. I'm delighted to be here today, and I thank you all for listening today. I am neither an archivist or a legislative expert, but a deeply concerned sixth-generation Alabamian who values the free flow of information. I'd like to tell you about my lifelong affair with the Alabama Archives, the oldest and best of its kind in our country. As a child from the Mississippi Delta, one of the joys of our summer was visiting our grandparents in Montgomery. And that visit always included trips to the archives. An amazing, gleaming, brilliant memorial brimming with history and information about Alabama and the South. It was right up there with the Monkey Island on our must-see list. Since Joe, my husband, and I moved to Montgomery in 1991, we have been to the archives and attended myriad entertaining and educational events, thanks to this old friend from my childhood. You name it. Country music, longleaf pines, quilts, food, civil rights, even the Ku Klux Klan. I'm here to tell you that there is no agenda at the archives except to preserve and disseminate the history of Alabama and of the United States. There have been thousands of people who enjoy the fruits of this great institution and its world-class state museum. The archives is for every one of us, and it must continue to be. I implore you to consider carefully as you deliberate the proposals for a compromise on Senate Bill 77. This wonderful institution and Alabama treasure must remain stable as it has for 123 years. It is incapable, educated, dedicated and very fair hands, both in its staff and board of trustees. This I know. Please do not rush to judgment. The stakes are very high.
Thank you, Ms. Lanu. We appreciate you being here today. Tom Turley, you're recognized. Wanda Battle, you're on deck. Lane Clemens, you're in the hall.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Tom Turley. I'm a resident of Montgomery, and I was a staff member at the Archives for 25 years. I retired in 2016. I'm here today to talk just briefly about the Archives history. Steve has already covered a good deal of that, so I'll just hit the high spots. The Archives, when it was founded back in 1901, was created essentially by the first director, Thomas Owen, who was an attorney and worked with with legislators at that time to craft the enabling legislation that set the Archives up. It set up an autonomous, nonpartisan board of trustees that was broadly representative and subject to legislative oversight by senatorial confirmation of its members and legislative control of the finances. Now the legislature has decided to revisit that organization, and I'm very glad that the amendments that have been proposed have been proposed. But please, in making your decision about the Archives' future, try to remember what it has done for the state of Alabama in the past. It's only a few years ago it was integral in the bicentennial of celebrating the bicentennial of Alabama statehood, and it also works with and oversees such organizations as the Alabama Academy of Honor, the Alabama Historical Association, the Committee on the Alabama Monuments Preservation, and state and local governments. I want to say a little bit about that because I worked primarily with state and local governments and historical repositories, particularly local governments. I worked with a commission that was a grant funding agency. It was always very broadly based, and in my 25 years there, I never saw any evidence that the Archives had a political agenda. So I urge you, please keep all of that in mind and support the amendments to this bill and continue to support this great Alabama institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turley. We appreciate your time. Wanda Battle, you're recognized. Lane Clemens, you're on deck. Alex Kim Yon, you're in the hole.
Members of the committee, my name is Wanda Howard Battle, founder of Legendary Tours. I'm a longtime supporter of the Department of Archives and History and a current member of the Friends of the Archives Board. I speak to you today. People from all over the world come to Montgomery to visit our museums and cultural sites. People want to feel a connection to the past, and they want to draw lessons from it. One of the best historical resources this state has is the Alabama Archives. The Archives is one of the most respected and respectful institutions of its kind in the country. When students from schools in some of your districts tour the exhibits at the Archives, they won't find a political agenda. What they will find are representations of all parts of Alabama's history, the good, the bad, and everything in between. They will see my history, a woman born during the Montgomery bus boycott and whose life has been impacted by it, and I'm sure they will too. Several other speakers today have referenced and proposed amendments to Senate Bill 77 that would accomplish the desire for most and more oversight while not sacrificing the steadiness of the Archives governing structure. This is important work. Boards set the course of an agency. I'm asking you to continue in these productive conversations to make Senate Bill 77 better. Our history deserves nothing less than your best effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Battle. We appreciate your time. Lane Clemens, you're up. Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Is it Alex Kim Yon?
Yes, ma'am.
You're recognized. Susan Stewart, you're on deck. Mary Ann Martin, you're up. You're in the hole.
Good morning. My name is Alex Kim Yon, and I reside in Alabama House District 20. I don't work or volunteer for the Archives, but I am one of countless queer Alabamians who grew up here, pays taxes here, votes here, and contributes to the public good here, in my case as a public librarian and civil servant. It has been made clear to me that Senate Bill 77, as it is written, is Senator Elliott's retaliatory response to a Lunch and Learn program about LGBTQ history at the Alabama Department of Archives and History this past year. He said himself in the Senate floor debate that this event was not history, thereby negating the professional experience and achievements of Dr. Megan Sullivan, an award-winning archivist and director of the Invisible History Project's research and development. Both Dr. Sullivan and the Invisible Histories Project are reputable and highly qualified to present a lecture about the queer history of the state, a history that has been historically suppressed by the likes of Senator Elliott, who defines history as being about achievements but cannot be bothered to recognize ours. Before this event, Senator Elliott and his co-sponsors had no qualms about the Alabama Archives Board of Trustees nominating their own replacements for Senate approval. This bill is a transparent bid for government overreach by a member of the political party that claims to support small government. It would put the fate of the entire state's history in the hands of 4 people who could appoint and remove board members at will for even the slightest perceived transgression. Already, Governor Ivey has unceremoniously removed a renowned library advocate from the Alabama Public Library Service Executive Board and then replaced her with an active member of the group Moms for Liberty. Even the Senate amendment calling for the appointing authorities to coordinate their appointments to assure the Board of Trustees is inclusive and shall reflect the racial, gender, geographic, urban, rural, and economic diversity of the state, instills little confidence after the redistricting debacle over the summer. I, for one, am not convinced that the appointing officers proposed by the bill as written would have the best interests of the Alabama Archives and the history of all Alabamians at heart. I urge you to reject the bill as it is presented, accept the amendments proposed by the Alabama Archivists, and continue this honorable work of preserving all of our history. Thank you.
Ms. Kimyon, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you being here. Susan Stewart, you're recognized. Mary Ann Martin, you're on deck.
Good morning. I'm Susan Stewart. I live in District 10, so I'm an orphan right now if anyone wants to adopt me. We don't have a representative right now. I'm just okay, thank you. I'm just a private citizen from Huntsville, but I have watched and assisted my husband of 41 years in his research as an art historian, so I do care about the integrity of history. I came to speak today to respond to some of the arguments that Senator Elliott had made on the floor of the Senate last week. Mr. Murray and Ms. Boyd covered the first two wonderfully well, the problems with the board being self-nominating, the problems with the board not having, in his mind, accountability to elected officials. So I'm going to give you a little more time to talk about the third reason, which Alex has just touched on, and that was that LGBTQ history is not real history. He's actually spoke at length about this on the floor of the Senate, although today he said it was irrelevant to why this is going on. He said he doesn't care who someone had sex with last night, and that history is only what you've done, what you've accomplished. Those are quotations. The statement alone shows why history is not safe in the hands of politicians. It's like saying that race is irrelevant to the history of civil rights. This week is the anniversary of the death, 25 years ago, of Billy Jack Gaither, who was murdered in Alabama for being gay. I don't see how to write that history without mention of his sexual orientation. History doesn't happen in a vacuum. Protect the integrity of our history. Vote no on SB 77, or at least accept the recommended amendments by the archives. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Stewart, we appreciate so much your time. Thank you for being here. Is it Mary Ann Martin? You're now recognized. She'll be our final speaker today, in case I warbled that. Thank you for being here. Please pronounce your name because I'm not sure I did it right.
I'm Mary Ann Martin.
Okay, good.
And first of all, I want to thank your clerk for being so patient when I spoke with her yesterday and for emailing her my concerns. I've been working on character education issues since the early 1990s. My writings and appeals have influenced Alabama legislative commitments that have made since 1995. In 2000, then Representative Mike Rogers, who's now Congressman Rogers, sponsored the Alabama State of Character Resolution. I've worked with Alabama legislative leaders in keeping this resolution updated. I want to appeal for common sense to prevail in your actions because I'm trusting that Alabama is going to become the leader in the state of character movement in this nation. After 9/11, I was invited to the White House to explain how to get character education strategies from the federal level to the grassroots. And at the end of the meeting, the White House liaison to the U.S. Department of Ed asked me to promise I would do all my power to see that Alabama again influences the nation's character education movement. One of the strategies that I have thought of and discussed with my mentors, including the late Representative Steve McMillan, was having the State of Character movement coming out of Alabama. And I brought handouts for all of you. The first one has a bit more information in it, but if you will please make sure that this gets into the hands of those on this committee. Recently in 2023, former Chief of Staff Joe Bonner met with Barbara Patton, who serves on the Board of Trustees for Archives, Nan Hobbs Barganier, who is the daughter-in-law of the late senior federal judge, Judge Hobbs Sr., and myself. We came up with strategies to raise visibility for the Alabama Character Commitments. And one of it is to have, again, Alabama Character Day at Archives. And I've been quietly working on this for many, many months. And I'm trusting that we are going to have a bipartisan effort in making sure that we have Alabama Character Day and that we don't have mud on our face because of upset with the board.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. I would ask for our.
And let me say one more thing.
I'd ask for our pages to get those items from her and
Steve
distribute them
Murray
for her.
and his team have been so helpful ever since we started these Alabama Character Day programs at Archives and History, which was years ago.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Martin. We appreciate you being here. The pages are going to make sure that our members get those handouts.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Hamilton?
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted, for the record, I would like for all of you to know that Ms. Odessa Woolfolk, who is a scholar, educator, community, civil rights activist in Birmingham, wanted to be here. She has health challenges. She has written her letter to you, and I have copies to be distributed to you. And I just wanted to
Yes, we one of the pages, go get those and have those distributed as well. I want to thank y'all for being here, and what a great presentation that each speaker gave. Yes, sir, Representative Lawrence.
I want to thank everyone that spoke today, but I want to, I guess, challenge this committee. This is the first time, and I've been here for 8, going on 9 years. This is the first time that I've been a part of a public hearing where everyone that spoke was in somewhat displeased with the bill, or they wanted the bill to die. They was totally against the bill. And for me, that says a lot, because we as legislators, we always come here and we say we want to do what's best for our constituents. We want to do what's best for the people that brought us here. Well, looking out in the audience today, there's not one single person in the audience that spoke in favor of this bill. And that should say a lot to us as committee members. Because I think what we have to start doing as legislators, not voting on the bill because of the sponsor, but because of the relevance and the substance of the bill, of the legislation itself. And I think if we get back to doing that, I think we can really, truly represent the people that brought us here.
Thank you for comments. Any other members would like to be recognized? All right, thank y'all. We appreciate you being here. Do I hear a motion for adjournment? So we're adjourned. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Excuse me.
catch them in the hallway. They've got other places to go. If you can catch them, they're going to be looking.
Okay, I just want to say thank you. Hello. Do you know we have a character center in Tuscaloosa?
Ma'am?
There's a character center, training center in Tuscaloosa at the University of Alabama.
I wasn't aware of that.
There is.
Yeah, I'd like to visit that sometime.
Did you get one of my?
I did.
We need to have much more support from the state for character education.
Okay.
We have two character centers, one at Sanford, the Hope Institute, and the other one is the University of Alabama.
Okay.
I'll email you because I read that you came out of the University of Alabama. Thank you.
I did.
Thank you. Really impressive.
You know how to get in touch with me, right?
Yes, and did you get one of my handouts?
I did.
I understand.
Please follow up on me, okay? Please follow up.
I mean, I was going to be like, don't do it. Did you? Yeah. Hello. I didn't have time to talk.
You doing all right? Good to see you. Good to see you.
I didn't have time to cruise, but